Here's what you're missing over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios,
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, patrons. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And if you might recall, several months ago, we had our friend Brad Gottfried on to talk about his book, Lincoln Comes to Gettysburg. And there's so much to talk about that we said, well, you know what? We have to do a part two because part one part was just not enough. And so we're going to do a part two today. And we're talking about Lincoln being here. We're going to spend most of the time talking about Lincoln being here. But yeah, we'll get to some backstory first before we actually put Lincoln here. Joining us, sitting in, as he often does, is Mike Lentz. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Doing well. Not too bad.
Great. And we just had a nice little talk beforehand, and you are quite learned on the subject, as you are with most of the subjects that you come in for. So I wonder, when you don't come in, is it because you're not as learned?
Well, I have to tell you, when I saw Mike sitting here when I came in, because he wasn't here the first interview, I said, oh boy, I'm in trouble.
For me, this is one of my passion things, is
Lincoln at
Gettysburg, but also 19th century politics.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
a lot of the story of Lincoln at Gettysburg is wrapped in 19th century politics.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it really is a fascinating time. It is so unusual to us in the 21st century. Such a different way of looking at politics, and what people and what was expected of the president when it comes to public remarks. Well, it's actually a pretty fascinating case study.
And we were just talking a little bit before we started about that stuff, and it's kind of we can get into it as we go, but it's kind of the opposite of the way we look at things, especially the president today.
Yes,
and but all right, so good. So we'll cover that when we go into everything, and of course, our guest today is Brad Gottfried. Hello, Brad.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, just fine. It's good to see you. It's always good to have you on, Brad. I always enjoy our conversations.
Me too. Thank you for the invitation.
I think it's because we're both from New Jersey.
Could be.
Right?
I'm trying to remember how many times I've actually been here. Maybe 3.
I think this is your 4th.
And I survived, so I keep coming back.
You're a glutton for punishment. You keep coming back in. All right. So, and by the way, we should mention that you wrote this with your wife, Linda.
Yes, it's Lincoln Comes to Gettysburg, and I think she came during the last taping.
She did, but she didn't talk. She doesn't like talking to us, I guess.
She likes to just sit there and give me dirty looks.
Right.
Especially when I'm messing up or making things up.
Yeah. It's like every ex-girlfriend I've ever had. They just give me dirty looks. So,
yeah.
And then I just saw this here. Doug Dowds did the forward, which is appropriate because we had him on in November. We did a show about the Gettysburg Address.
Yes,
and,
he's very good.
Oh, he's great.
Yes.
He's great. All right, so let's get into a little bit of a backstory first. Do we invite President Lincoln?
Oh boy, it's such an interesting question. We have to go back to who is organizing this function. So you have these agents. You have an agent from each state, and they're the ones who are really responsible for determining, let's say you have a loved one and they've been wounded, but how badly have they been wounded? Where are they? I want to come visit them. It's the agent that you come to talk to about, they're going to be doing some sleuthing. And then after the cemetery is created and they're moving bodies and everything's good, they've got to determine how do you dedicate it. And so they're going to be making the decisions about, what it's going to look like. But the problem is this is really the first national cemeteries, even before Arlington.
Yeah.
And so they've never had, they don't have any models. And the only thing they could have is a model of a municipal cemetery or a private cemetery. So they have to decide what they're going to do. And do we invite the president? Well, he's not coming. Of course he's not coming. He's coming. That was a shocker.
So they invite him as a formality, but they don't expect him to come.
That's correct.
Right.
Although David Wills, who's the main guy in Gettysburg, and the governor, Andrew Curtin, they both are really agitating. They want Lincoln because he's going to add credibility. This is being billed as the event of the century. And what better way of doing it than having the president who generally doesn't leave Washington?
Right.
And so that's going to make a big difference. And, that they bring in this guy. His name is Ward Layman, who is an attorney. He is, about Ward. He's one of Lincoln's best buddies. And he's very meticulous. He's going to help create this ceremony. But the backstory is he's going to get Lincoln to come.
Okay.
And so my question is, how common is it for the president to give public remarks in this period?
Right.
How often does the president go away from Washington, D.C., or even in Washington, say, go to Congress?
Right.
Does he ever go and deliver the State of the Union address?
And we were talking about that before. It's a fascinating story. And Mike, I think you're more conversant on it than I. But one of the reasons why Lincoln, he said, yeah, sort of, kind of, I might just be able to come, but he wasn't really certain until the very last minute. But they don't do State of the Union addresses. We're so used to it. The president droning on, beating his chest. Back then, they didn't. And he had homework to do. He had to create a document. It was due, I don't know if it was in the Constitution or whatever, but on December the 8th of every year, he must file a document with Congress highlighting his, basically it's a State of the Union. But rather than anybody droning through it, they can bring it to their bed and they can read it while they're going to sleep because it's going to put them to sleep very quickly. And he had a number of things that he's working on, and he says, gee, I haven't finished my homework. Can I afford to come?
Yeah.
And so, presidents don't generally leave the White House. They don't leave Washington because it's so tough.
Right.
Now, Lincoln is going to have left. In fact, I think he may be one of the first presidents who spent much time outside of Washington. He's going to hop on a boat in 1862 and go down to the peninsula, when George McClellan is involved in, trying to shoo the Confederates out of Richmond. But there he could just hop on a boat. He goes to Antietam. And again, he can use the canal and the river system. But here, he's not using any water. He would have to hop on a train, not two trains, but 3 separate lines to get here. It's not going to be easy.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why nobody thought he was coming.
So when he's on this train, is he writing the speech or is he writing the State of the Union?
Well, that's an interesting point because one of the great mysteries is when did he write the Gettysburg Address?
Right.
And now, I'm older than you guys, and even before my time, it used to be like if you were a kid in the 1920s, 1930s, you would have to read a short story by Mary Shipman Andrews. It's a tiny little story. Everybody had to read it. It's fiction, although nobody told you it was fiction. And basically it was, and I think you may have heard it. In fact, I'll mention it, and people look at me like I'm nuts because they didn't even hear the story. How Lincoln is on the train. He sees an envelope on the ground. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Pulls off his giant top hat and pulls out a pencil and uses the hat for a writing desk. Well, that's not true. There was an envelope involved, but it wasn't an envelope that and he may have pulled out an envelope and he's, like me, I don't know about the rest of you, but like if I have a shopping list, I have my back pocket and I'm taking notes or whatever. We think that he may have been doing that, but not writing the whole darn thing. And you think about it, we're spoiled. If you get on a train, a cellar or whatever, and, they're kind of smooth. You can take a nap. You can write your whatever, do your homework. Back then, those trains were very, rocking back and forth.
Didn't have very good shocks.
No, and they're noisy. And Lincoln is not coming here by himself. He's bringing all of his buddies. And, Lincoln, even though he's somewhat of an introvert, he likes to crack jokes. He likes to interact. He's not going to sit in a corner, doing his homework.
Right.
So we know that he did his first page. It's a 2-pager, the Gettysburg Address. We know the first page he finished probably about the 17th of November in the White House when he's just thinking, I think I'm coming. But he didn't finish it. And I always tell people when I'm giving a town tour, I said, when I was a kid growing up and I had a homework assignment, it always got done the night before. It never got done in advance. So he's got an unfinished report that's due tomorrow So he's got to come over and he's going to burn the midnight oil trying to finish up that Gettysburg Address at the Wills House.
It's so fascinating to me, and I don't know. Before we started the show, we were talking about the recent lecture where they, the Oakley placed the platform,
yes,
through his research, at a certain spot and all that. And I said, what's fascinating to me is why we care. Like, why do we care? What does it matter, right? The substance isn't where he stood. It's what he said.
Indeed.
Right? That's what lasts through the ages, is what he said. But I was just thinking as you were saying this, like I don't know of any other speech that people are so obsessed with.
Right.
Like probably I would put Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech up there with that. I might know a line or two of it, but it's a little longer than the Gettysburg Address, so it's harder to commit to memory. Right. But it's famous. But and I'm sure there are circles. We're a little nerdy in our little world here, so this is important. But I'm sure for Martin Luther King historians and history buffs, that speech is parsed and everything about where he wrote it, and they know all this stuff and care about it like we do too. But it's just fascinating to me to think that, he's an afterthought to coming to this thing, and he's asked to deliver a few appropriate remarks. Right. And let's get into that after I finish this point. And then, and so he writes this, at the White House. Yeah, okay, I'll do this and everything, but I'll start writing it, and maybe he does a couple drafts or whatever, and so this is terrible. And he throws it out, and he starts over again. And then he comes and delivers it, and then he thinks it sucked.
Oh, he did.
Right. And then it just goes to show, and I use that to remind myself, every time I think I just, did a show and I sucked as a host and I didn't ask the good questions, or I just was off, or whatever it is. Right. And then, but I put it out anyway because I need to put something out, and then all these people, best one you've done, And I'm like, really? And so it goes to show that we're a horrible judge of our own work, right?
No
we really don't know what the hell we're doing. But yeah, so he, I don't know. It was just a thought I had. There's really no question there. But let's get to a few appropriate remarks. So we're talking before about how all these people, Democrats and Republicans, they're on this committee. They're trying to put it together. Should we invite him? Yeah. But you had said before the show that there were some people who are like, yeah, but he can't talk.
Right. He can't talk. He can sit there and he can look like a president. Right. Maybe, maybe not. But he can't open his mouth.
Right. And I said, when you had said that earlier, I said, well, what's the point of having a president there if he can't talk? But that's 20th and 21st century way of thinking about it. Back then, the president, as we pointed out, rarely ever did anything like that, right? And if he did, it was probably around D.C. or something like that. He wouldn't go to other places. So this was their event, not his event.
That's correct.
And they're dedicating the Gettysburg Cemetery. But I mean, okay. So what is that about? He can't talk. We'll let him talk. That back and forth there. That's politics.
It is.
Yeah.
It's definitely politics. So he's going to be invited twice. He's going to be invited on November the 2nd, and that's when, he's really starting to cogitate about it. He's going to be invited again on the 14th. And on the 14th, Wills throws in a little kicker. He says, oh, and if you come, you can spend the night at my house.
Ooh, what a treat. And Lincoln's like, Mary, I've always wanted to stay at the Wills house in Gettysburg.
I mean, it's just walk a little way. There's a blue and gray right there, right?
Right.
It's fantastic. It's great.
There's wood-fired pizza right down the
road. Yeah. So he's not certain he's coming, but to the horror of the group, these agents, they find out he's planning on coming. It's like, holy cow. And so the agent from Illinois, who's a Republican, who is a personal friend, his name is Clark Carr, says to the group, he should speak. We should let the president speak. And all hell breaks loose. Because there are some who come up with these ideas like it's too long. It's, we don't want people to bring their pillows and their sheets because it's going to go on forever. He doesn't know how to give a speech like this. He's going to give off-color jokes. all of these crazy things.
That one stuck with me, the off-color jokes part, because
yes.
I think that is why I don't... Listen to the rest of this interview and dozens like it. Support the show and get early access to special episodes, early and discounted ticket sales, and more. The second lieutenant level and above gets access to all monthly Patreon episodes. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg, choose a tier, and join. And I thank you in advance.